Since we're starting a new book, I'm going to take this time as my very few opportunities that I use to talk before the episode starts to thank you all for listening to us. It's been 6 years now. And to thank especially our supporters on Ko-fi, Anna and Neva, for continued support, and everyone who has financially tipped us there as well. If you would like to contribute to that, please go to support.isfitshappy.com and you can support us on that, or just find us on Ko-fi. That is ko-fi.com. But thank you so much to everyone who just listens every week and who comments and asks us questions and engages. We really, really appreciate it.
We really love our little community that we've built. So thanks for sticking around for 6 years or joining us.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy. I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And this week we are discussing the prologue of Golden Fool, the second book of Tawny Man Trilogy, the 8th book of the Realm of the Elderlings. This is called Losses Sustained.
Yes. A titled prologue.
And it does not have an epigraph. However, it starts with italicized writing because Fitz is writing down, again, what he's wants to write down as like a knowledge base, like an objective paragraph of something, and it morphs into his own traumas and past, and he's frustrated by that.
Right. And in this prologue, it is present day Fitz, whoever that is, talking about this manuscript being as a past thing that he wrote right after Nighteyes passed away. And so that's really interesting because then it goes back to, again, this is an older Fitz telling this story and sort of explaining what happened in his life from a viewpoint that is different than the one that he was in when he was living through it.
Yeah, specifically, I think this is Fitz at the end of this trilogy before he has moved to Withy Woods with Molly. Later on, I'll highlight a section, but I have it in my notes scribbled here that he mentions his scores of years. And if we go by his reckoning, he's about 35 in present day. And then he does spend time at the castle after this trilogy and has time to woo Molly and things like that. But I wouldn't think he would mention scores of years unless he was 40.
I don't know. How many is a score of years?
20 is a score.
Okay, sure.
But that's my guess. Time is always a little wonky when Fitz is concerned.
Right. And I do bring up the sort of present past area because I know that a running fan theory is that potentially these books are something that B is telling the story of, or she's sort of
writing from his perspective, the things that he told her as he's carving his dragon.
Yeah.
Or the wolf, I guess.
Yeah. So I know that is a theory. So I just always try to, whenever we are clear that this is definitely happening outside of the time that it's going on, the events are taking place.
Right.
That I let everybody know, because I know that that's something that we are all curious about. Mm-hmm. When is this being written? Why? For who? I don't know.
And specifically, Fitz is talking, as you mentioned before, kind of about the loss of a wit bond partner and how someone who is non-witted can't understand it. Those who can speak of the death of an animal as it was only a dog will never grasp it. Others, more sympathetic, perceive it as the death of a beloved pet. Even those who say it must be like losing a child or a wife are still seeing only one facet of the toll. To lose the living creature that one has been linked with is more than the loss of a companion or loved one. It was the sudden amputation of half my physical body. My vision was dimmed, my appetite diminished by the insipid flavor of food. my hearing was dulled, and that's where he trails off, realizing that he switched to his own experiences rather than an objective point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But I highlighted a couple things in there. One, because it's the loss of his wife and child, which he has gone through. Basically, spying upon Molly and realizing she's pregnant and being like, okay, I have to lose the kid that I had with her too. And he has something kind of directly to compare that with. It's just like it's not quite as it's different than
Yeah. I
people
mean,
who say that.
he hasn't had anybody die, so
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
I think that
He's had them think that he was dead though. And
Yeah.
so in his mind, he is dead to them.
Yeah, but I guess in my mind it's different because they are still alive, so there is always the chance of like repairing that relationship, whereas like if they were truly lost to him, they would be gone. So there is a difference there, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, just drawing the parallel that he has something to draw on there between the two griefs, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
But that starts out his tone for this chapter of the sudden amputation of half his physical body. It's something that we've talked about before in the first trilogy of how Fitz kind of relies on his bond partners to do everything around him. That those are his senses. He never really had to kind of be a person alone in a human body.
Right. And I think this is pretty interesting to think on for a lot of reasons, right? Like we don't know if this is something that is normal to all witted people, like if everybody who bonds with a partner also borrows their senses in a way that's noticeable upon the wit partner's death, or if this is something that's happening because Fitz is too close to Nighteyes. I assume, considering the fact that most witted people have mannerisms like the animal they bond, that points to them also being like using their senses in some capacity.
100%, I think they do, but I think Fitz being raised and bonded so young multiple times just never let him be his own person first,
right?
Which he also touches on in this.
He also talks about how, so this manuscript he stopped because he got too angry, realizing that he's making it about himself again, and it's just a whole problem. And he was obviously in the throes of grief when he was writing this. And he talks about how he's surprised that the manuscript itself even ever survived, that there are crumples from where he stepped on it, and he's surprised it didn't get thrown in the fire, but wherever it was left, somebody put it away into the scrolls at Buckkeep to be kept for later.
Yeah.
And it might have been Thick, which I think is important to point out because future Fitz is speaking of Thick, which a first-time reader would not know who that is.
This is the first time we hear that name.
Yes. Thick has been hinted at in the last book only if you are a rereader and know what to look for.
Yeah, that music.
I mean, I guess technically it can still be hinted at and you don't know who. But as rereaders, it was very clear when Thick was in the story for brief moments. And here we know that Thick will be introduced because Thick is brought up as putting things away. But Fitz talks on about how that's sort of his style when he's writing. He's tried to write on many topics, and somehow he always weaves it back around to himself. There's always something about his writing that brings him back to himself, and he can't decide if that is just human nature, a way to sort of like leave his mark on the world, or if it's to explain his own life to himself. And he talks about how every night for basically his whole life, he has been writing. He writes. And whether that's purposely about himself or not, he is always writing every night.
And that's where I have that sentence highlighted. The years have come and gone in their scores of turnings, and night after night I still take pen in hand and write. So he's at least, I would guess, at least 40 here. So who knows? It could be in the time after this trilogy. It could be in the final trilogy where he's like 60 and returning back and finds this old dusty scroll that he had written at one point.
Yeah.
During this trilogy that we don't see.
Right. But anyway, he talks about how he still strives to understand who he is. Still, I promise myself, next time I will do better, in the all too human conceit that I will always be offered a next time. Yet I did not do that when I lost Nighteyes. I never promised myself that I would bond again and do better by my next partner. And that is on purpose. He doesn't think it would be right to Nighteye's memory. He doesn't
Right.
think that it would be right to the bond that they shared, and he doesn't really want to try again. He doesn't want to get that close to another person because of how bad it hurt. Or not person, but being. Because of how bad it hurt and how vulnerable he feels.
And the framing of this with him as an older Fitz looking back allows some distance as a prologue for this book, because we
Yes.
leave off with him feeling this fresh wound, and now he's looking back on this perspective of like, I was walking around thinking that the loss, the grief was the only thing that was harming me there, but we get a little bit more perspective going into Golden Fool that he was also missing a lot of his senses, and he just didn't realize it
Yeah.
because it was all kind of covered up into one thing.
Right. And I mean, with grief, there is that sort of feeling of the world dulling for some people. And
Yeah.
so it would make sense that he suffers this great loss. Everything seems dull by comparison now without Nighteyes there. Of course, you're not going to immediately realize that the gifts that you were given through your wit bond are what's missing. That's why it's dull, because it just matches your mood and how you're feeling. And so Fitz really did struggle with this, and does talk about this time without Nighteyes as his sort of second coming of age.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was hinting at before, and why I kept bringing up he's never had time alone, because Fitz comments on it here that it was not an arrival at manhood, but rather a slow realization of myself as an individual. Circumstances had plunged me back into the intrigues of the court at Buckkeep Castle, and kind of recap a little bit here of, I had, my friendships with Fool and Shade, stood on the edge of a true relationship with Jinnah. My boy Hap was flinging himself headlong into an apprenticeship and romance. And young Prince Dutiful, poised on the lip of his betrothal to the out-islander Narcheska, had turned to me as a mentor. But I was alone more than I had ever been in my life. He says, I did not lack for the people who cared about me, nor for folk I deeply cherished. And in this retroactive, looking back on this moment in time, he also says the strangest part was my slow realization that I chose that isolation.
Yeah, so this is a big part of Fitz's identity, right? Is that he is alone, that there's no one who understands him the way Nighteyes does, and that he's been by himself. And we have sort of talked about how we're disappointed in Chade and Ketcherkin and all the people that Fitz had in his life that didn't reach out to him and continue to be like, hey, we still love you, we want you here, because they could have at any point done that. But in this moment, we also get to talk about how a little bit that's Fitz's fault too.
Yeah, and Fitz talks about that.
Yes.
And it's in typical Fitz fashion that he blames himself wholly for it.
Right.
When we took the side of like, no.
Like, it's a two-way thing.
Yeah. But this is Fitz himself describing it as like, this was wholly my choice, completely my fault for isolating myself. Blah, 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 pity, pity me.
Yeah, but he does talk about how part of the reasoning is that Nighteyes was a part of him. So he says, he was not half of me. Together, we made a whole. So part of him not realizing the choices he made to be alone is because he had another part of him. Like, he had Nighteyes there.
Yeah. He was never truly alone.
Right. And so he didn't realize how isolated he was getting because there was always someone with him. And there was always that sort of fallback of, well, I have Nighteyes and we're making decisions together. And he talks about how even when Hap came into their life, that was a cub and a responsibility that they made decisions together to take care of. Hap wasn't
right.
a person let in on that confidence, which in some ways makes sense because Hap was a child, right? Like, he shouldn't be at the same level as Fitz and Nighteyes. However, it's just sort of that bringing home of Fitz was pushing people away without realizing it because he didn't realize how isolated he had become.
And then he goes also on a little bit of a a memory hunt here, bringing up a time when he remembers Patience and Lacey discussing relationships and mostly older men at court who are set in their ways. If they are trying to court a young girl, they're like, nah, Spring has turned his head, but he's... he's
One assumption Patience and Lacey had shared was that a man or woman who had passed their 30th year unwed was likely to remain so. Quote, set in his ways, Patient would declare at the gossip that some graying lord had begun courting a young girl. Spring has turned his head, but shall soon find that there's no room in his life for a partner. He's had it all his own way too long. And so I began, very slowly, to see myself.
I think it's a really funny description to say that they kind of... Patience and Lacey said that about anyone who had turned 30, like any man who had turned 30 without being wed. And then immediately the next line is some graying lord.
Yes. Well, you know what? Some of us gray early, and so would be gray in our 30s. But yes, it's interesting though too to have that little bit, because it does speak to sort of that I think universal experience of like something that someone you love and care about says offhandedly in your youth that sticks with you. And it's not always like, oh, if you don't make it to 30, then you're a spinster forever. But there are those little comments, right, that you live through where like it's just a one-off, and I'm sure they don't even remember making the comment, but Fitz does, and it stuck with him. And so then that sort of is who he becomes, because he gets closer and closer to 30 and then passes 30 and isn't married and never married. And now it's just too late, and it's excused because, well, that's what his mom said. So.
And this is why I think Fitz is not in the final trilogy yet. And I think it's after this, but before Molly, is because he's feeling more and more lonely. And he knows that he's questing out with the wit, but not out of want for another bond partner, because he says, no one, human or animal, could ever fill the gap that Nighteyes had left in my life. And I just don't think he would say that if he was with Molly at the time.
Well, I don't know, because I think it's still true even with Molly there. I think that Nighteyes is such a big part of who he is and was that...
Yeah.
Like, even as much as he loves Molly, she's not going to compare to the bond that he had with Nighteyes. So I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I think he would still say it. Maybe just wouldn't be so dramatic. But he does say that he has even said as much to the Fool. And we get a little bit of a flashback to when the Fool, Laurel, Dutiful, and Fitz were traveling back to Buckkeep.
Yeah, just, 3 chapters ago in the Tawny Man trilogy or something.
Which is so interesting, because I was thinking about it, and last book, when they went back, it sort of is all glossed over as just a time of grief where...
It's 1 chapter where they ride back, yeah.
And Fitz doesn't really go into detail about how long it takes to get there or what they did. He just talks about how he and Dutiful both sort of rode in gloomy silence, and Laurel and Lord Golden were sort of talking together, and he was jealous. So we don't really get any more than that. So it's interesting then to have this chapter, or I guess prologue, where we come back to what we just read and see just how depressed Fitz was during there that we didn't get detail by detail of. But during this time, when they were in between places, they had stopped to camp for the night, and Fitz walked away from the fire where Laurel, Fool, and Dutiful were sitting on the excuse that he's finding more wood for the fire. But really, he just couldn't stand to be around Dutiful, who was also mourning the loss of a wit partner, because it felt like holding a mirror up to his own pains, and he just didn't want to. And especially because they have that bond, that skill bond, he didn't want to feel his own pain more strongly reflected through that bond. So he sort of excuses himself from the situation, and really interestingly and tellingly, he is stumbling in the dark through the woods
Yeah.
because he can't see anything. And then he has to stop on a rock to wait for his eyes to adjust. And at no point does Fitz in this story talk about how, like, see, and there it was. I couldn't see without my wolf and I didn't even know it. But because we were primed with that before and we're rereaders, we can tell that, like, wow, Nighteyes really is gone because Fitz should be able to see
Right.
the
right.
wood there.
So he sits down, kind of waiting for his eyes to adjust, but more just choosing to be alone again and getting away from the companionship around the fire. And the fool finds him. He sat down on the earth beside me, and for a time we said nothing. Then he reached over, set a hand on my shoulder, and said, "I wish there were some way I could ease your grieving." It was a useless thing to say, and he seemed to feel that, for after those words he was silent. Perhaps it was the ghost of Nighteyes who reproached me of my surly silence to our friend, for after a time I groped for some words to bridge the dark between us. "It is like the cut on your head, fool. Time will heal it, but until it does, all the best wishes in the world cannot make it heal faster. Even if there were some way to disperse this pain, some herb or drunkenness that would numb it, I could not choose it. Nothing will ever make his death better. All I can look forward to is becoming accustomed to being alone." Despite my effort, my words still sounded like a rebuke. Worse, it seemed a self-pitying one. It is a tribute to my friend that he did not take offense at them. He only rose gracefully. "I'll let you be, then. I think you are choosing to mourn alone, and if that is your choice, I'll respect it. I do not think it is your wisest choice, but I'll respect it." He paused and gave a small sigh. "I perceive something about myself now. I came because I wanted you to know that I knew you were in pain. Not because I could heal you of it, but because I wanted you to be aware that I shared that pain through our connection. I suspect there is an aspect of selfishness to that I wished you also to be aware of it, I mean. A burden shared not only can lighten it, it can form a bond between those who share it, so that no one is left to bear it alone." Fitz remains a little quiet and then says, "I'll come back to the fire in a little while," as a dismissal, and the fool understands that and walks away. Fitz then says, "Later I considered his words, and I understood them then, that I was choosing to be alone. It was not the inescapable consequence of the wolf's death, nor even a carefully considered decision. I was embracing my solitude, courting my pain." Nice little interaction that personally, this is not about the content of it. I just feel like it doesn't sound like the fool here. I don't know why, but to me, it just doesn't seem like an interaction that they would have had. I understand Fitz's side of it. I just don't quite get the words on the fool's side. Maybe because we went through multiple chapters in the last book where Fitz is like, "And my friend never said anything to me because he knew." I don't know. It seems slightly off to me. I can accept it intellectually. It just
Right.
seems slightly off
Yeah,
as
I
the
guess
fool here.
specifically also we did have a whole big thing last book where Fitz hadn't talked to the fool at all, and that was kind of making him upset. Like you said, like it was the realizing that, like, oh, he actually knew better than anyone else to leave me alone.
Right.
So yeah, there is like a little bit of weirdness that then he would turn around and, like, actually he did try to talk to me. But I feel like in the conversation point, it does feel like something fool would say. Like, it feels a little weird to be like, I'm being selfish and letting you know that I feel your pain too. Cause I don't think Beloved would admit that.
Yeah, and I
Like
don't
that.
think Beloved would also say a burden shared not only can lighten it, it can form a bond between those who share it.
Yeah, this feels very like it's trying to heavily foreshadow the problems coming up, which is that Beloved does have a crush on Fitz, and this feels like it's really playing into that, which is fine. But I think I agree with you that, like, the timing of it and, like,
it just feels slightly off coming from that previous book to this. I don't know.
Yeah. I think, though, it's really interesting because I do appreciate sort of showing a friendship through grief in this way. I feel like having Fitz sort of be allowed to be mopey, for lack of better word.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying it's not warranted, obviously,
People
but
grieve differently.
yeah, and it's really interesting to see Fitz sort of like, again, I hesitate because I don't want this to come across as me like downplaying what Fitz went through or saying that he's being dramatic, but he is sort of being dramatic in how he's talking about it. And I think it's great that it's taken as his true feelings and not the fool just waving a hand saying you're being dramatic, if that makes sense. Like,
right.
As a person who is dramatic when I'm upset, that's how I also act. And it is really annoying when I'm like, that's truly how I feel in that moment. And somebody's like, oh, you're being dramatic. So it's really great to see this sort of like friendship where it's like accepted of, oh, Fitz is having a moment, but
specifically with nothing will ever make his death better. All I can look forward to is becoming accustomed to being alone. So yeah, like the fool didn't respond to those words directly. He didn't say like, oh, you'll have me. Like,
yeah,
we're going to be friends or you'll find somebody else. No, let him have his feelings, you know?
Yeah. And like,
and that's
what
happened.
Yeah. And I think it's really big too. And it like speaks to the depth of their friendship that the fool isn't taking offense in this moment.
No. So this is the other thing maybe that I didn't feel like was totally the fool, and yet maybe it is the fool. We just haven't seen that side of him in the books yet. And that's Fitz saying he's not, reproachful about this. He doesn't take offense at them. But everything that the fool says in this paragraph is like, yeah, you're choosing to be alone though, and that's wrong.
Okay, that's fair.
So like to me, it's like oh yeah, of course, I'll let you be alone to your grief. I'm a great friend, but you're wrong. Like this is an awful decision, Fitz. And that didn't feel like the fool to me really.
That's
until he gets very spiteful in their fight later.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
So maybe that's where my disconnect is coming in. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, Fool typically isn't one to tell Fitz what to do, so it is a little bit... But I think this is one of those, like, hey, you shouldn't be alone in your grief in this moment.
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
Don't hold yourself up. I feel like it's okay because it is such a, like, specific situation,
right,
where like the rules are a little bit different than normal. And I said that he takes it well. I'm not saying I don't think the fool's feelings were not hurt. I think fool absolutely would be hurt by those things being said.
Yeah, but he does like, despite me saying this, because it's just a hint through the pages, it's not like actually spelled out like what I'm saying. I do think he takes it well. Yeah. And responds to it well.
I think he understands that his friend is hurting in a way that is like incomparable to anything else and isn't taking this as like I think it'd be different if this was like the death of Starling and that's how Fitz was acting. I think Fool would take a huge offense to this sort of attitude.
The Fool would be celebrating still around the fire.
True.
Are you kidding?
I don't know. So it's one of those things where it's like kind of I can see it both ways sort of way. But I don't know. I just thought that the way that the grief is depicted in this chapter, especially, is really interesting and it feels real to me. But I also just recently went through a lot of grief, so like it's really interesting how like different facets are like as you live life and reread these books, they become more clear or feel different. So it's like interesting to have that here of like, oh my gosh, yeah, I felt this, and like I feel Fitz right now, and like in a way that I would not have the first time I read it. Yeah. So.
But Fitz, again, in his own way, chooses to take that wisdom that the Fool gave him of being like, hey, you can bond with other people through this grief, and say like, oh yeah, I chose every opportunity to be alone, and that's my fault. Like I am at fault for this. It is wrong of me to do that. It's Fitz being Fitz and saying that everything that he chooses to do is wrong, which is so frustrating and heartbreaking to read at the same time.
Yeah.
But it is an example of what he's talking about in this, and where he kind of starts the Golden Fool, is that he chose to isolate himself a bit.
No one had forced me into that exile. The irony was that it had been the granting of my often voiced wish. Throughout my youth, I had always asserted that what I truly wanted was to live a life where I could make my own choices independent of the duties of my birth and position. It was only when fate granted that to me that I realized the cost of it. I could set aside my responsibilities to others and live my life as I pleased only when I also severed my ties to them. I could not have it both ways. To be part of a family or any community is to have duties and responsibilities, to be bound by the rules of that group. I had lived apart from that for a time, but now I knew that it had been my choice. I had chosen to renounce my responsibilities to my family and accepted the ensuing isolation as the cost. At the time, I had insisted to myself that fortune had forced me into that role, just as I was making a choice now, even though I tried to persuade myself I was, but following the inescapable path fate had sent out for me. To recognize you are the source of your own loneliness is not a cure for it, but it is a step towards seeing that it is not inevitable and that such a choice is not irrevocable.
Yeah, so he's talking about also his choice of isolation after the first trilogy.
Yes.
That's kind of what he was relating that previous sentiment to as well. So throughout the years, he's just chosen to isolate himself, which, like, this can be a realization for Fitz here, but it's not really anything that we didn't know before. And I think that Fitz understood it when he was choosing that isolation before as well. Even if later down the road, he's kind of like, I'm sad that no one's visiting me. This is kind of like the reason why. But I think he knew what he was choosing at the end of the first trilogy.
I don't think he did. I think in a way he knew what he was choosing, because obviously he knew that there was a lot of trouble if he decided to come back and be Fitz chivalry again, right? Like, he had died in the eyes of the court. A lot of people thought he was dead. And so to come back, that's a big thing. Like, he's choosing to let Fitz chivalry stay dead. Like, I think that is a choice he fully understood. He knew that that cut off certain parts of his life. I think what he didn't understand is that when he took it a step further by not trying to meet anyone in the middle, not going back, not still helping the family, not staying in contact, like, he was also choosing that part of the isolation. Like, him secluding himself was his own isolation choice. It wasn't a result of, like, happenstance of, like, oh, Fitz chivalry died, so I have to be alone in the woods, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I read his state of mind in the last trilogy as wanting that. So I went into that with a full expectation that, like, oh, Fitz knows he's cutting himself off from everybody because he wants that, because he has expressed multiple times that he just kind of wants to go off in the middle of nowhere and live his life. And he did that for a while. He lived with Nighteyes. He wandered around. He traveled. He lived with Black Rolf for a bit. Never once did he make an effort to reach out because, you know, that part of his life was dead, right?
Right.
So, yes, he continually made the choices to cut himself off, and we never really got a lot of yearning from him of wanting to reach out but refusing to.
I don't know.
There's wistfulness, definitely, like, oh, I wonder what they're up to and stuff, but there's never like, I need to not reach out because that part of me is dead.
I disagree. I think him constantly being drawn to skill out across was his version of that. I think.
You don't think that's just addiction?
Well, I'm sure partially yes, but I think it was made worse by the fact that he was so isolated. I think he didn't recognize the fact that he could at any time pick up a quill and write to his family and they would write him back. Like, it did not have to be as isolating as he made it. I think you can tell that he is itching for freedom. I think he got into a routine and didn't see how bad it was until he had those visits. We see as soon as Chade and the Fool visit, all of a sudden he's chafing. He feels like the place he's lived the whole 10 years he's been gone is now too small. It's too mundane. I think that's how it was for a while, and he got used to it. And I think the reason we don't see that is because it isn't outright a yearning for those people, because he's put it out of his mind. But I think the increase of wanting to skill out, the increase of the writing about his life and time when he had friends and family surrounding him, I think that's probably a byproduct of that yearn that he was silencing.
We know he also sent scrolls with Starling to Chade quite often.
Yeah.
Never got anything personal or sent anything personal back. But that decision and that chafing later on is 15 years later. So in my mind, his first initial choice to disconnect from everything, he went in full knowing, and it just later on is like, okay, this has been a lot.
I think something that we see in Dutiful and we see in young Fitz is this idea that if only they lived in the middle of nowhere, they wouldn't have duties.
Right.
And I think the way Fitz did it, it was true. However, I think the thing that has always bothered me that I couldn't quite put into words of like why I disagree with that sentiment is what this chapter talks about of like to be in a community is to have duties. Like even if you're not a king, even if you're just a guy who works in the docks, like you have duties, you have to pay bills, you have to eat, you have to do all these things. Like you're never free of duty. And I think that obviously the duties that were put on Fitz and are put on Dutiful now are a lot heavier than a lot of average people.
Which is like what I think he's mainly trying to escape.
But I think that naively, Fitz was equating just that as duty, like the stuff he didn't like as duty that he had to do, and if he could just get away from that. And what he meant was he just didn't want to have to be an assassin. He didn't want to have to play the political game. He doesn't want to have to be the bastard at court, right? Like he still wanted his friends and family, and he wanted to be a scribe. He wanted to do all these things. And I think that because of who he is, he thought the only way to get out of this part that he didn't like was to remove himself fully from the stuff that he did too. I don't know. Like, I don't think that he like consciously knew that he was making the choice.
I kind of disagree about the duties part because Fitz has never shirked from his tasks and has never considered like his homesteading a duty that's heavy. You know, he always has been one to like, okay, now we need to fish and smoke the fish and take care of the chickens and do all that. Like he always does his tasks and his duties as he's isolated, living in his cabin with hardly a complaint. I mean, some days are better than others, obviously. That's everybody. So I really think that like his escaping and I need to leave my duties behind were those heavier ones that you were talking about before. And I think that once he got away from those, he was completely fine living on his own for a while. Again, because we mentioned earlier on in this episode, he had Nighteyes.
Right.
And I think that the mortality of Nighteyes kind of coming up to the forefront as well with the visit with the Fool really accelerated that itching of like that scared boy in Fitz's head that already thought Nighteyes was dead and was pulling away, that Nighteyes confronted him about later, is just like, okay, what do I do after Nighteyes is dead? I am all alone now, and that's why he was itching. That's my kind of read on Fitz's character in the beginning of Tawny Man, at least.
Okay.
It's an interesting place to set Fitz up for the rest of this book, though, is him retroactively looking at himself being like, I chose to be alone, but I know now that you have to buy into the community. You have to accept everything if you want to get everything back. You can't just pick and choose. So it's not really a rebuke of his past self, but it's an understanding of where he needs to get to and where he is not at the beginning of this book.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this prologue episode. If you have any thoughts on it, please let us know at isfitshappy@gmail.com, or you can message us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, Blue Sky, Reddit, or at isfitshappy at all of those. Comment on our posts, message us directly, whatever you want. Thank you so much for tuning in.
See you next week. All right. Time for our favorite part, which we have put off for a bit. So,
Yeah.
so this is going to be a long one, but
we took a couple week break and then a couple weeks of episodes that we did not do this part for.
yeah, we couldn't. It was too long of episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, we could have, but like realistically, y'all do not want us to come out with a 3-hour long podcast.
I feel like a handful of you do.
Yes.
But like that's a lot.
Yeah. And see, we started this thinking that we would like never go past an hour and a half, and
we have in our notes, because I was looking at that recently, of just like our previous formation notes of this, of what we wanted the podcast to be like. And we're like, an hour is a good length. Try to keep it around that. A little bit shorter is perfect. We don't want it to stretch to an hour and a half, and our average is an hour and a half.
Yeah, shout out to you guys for being down to listen to up to 2 hours of us talking. Appreciate you.
And also shout out to Anna and Neva for always supporting us, recurring that. That's so great. And also, I don't know if I've mentioned this person, so I'm going to thank him again. Jacqueline, thank you so much for supporting on Ko-fi as well.
Yeah, always good to make sure. Double instead of instead of on miss it.
Yeah, I don't want to miss that. So
thank you.
I say thank you.
And without further ado, we're gonna start with some emails that we got from listeners. And the first one is just a quick touch from Lauren, who just wrote in to talk about their experience listening to our podcast for the Nighteyes episode, which was devastating to listen to, but a very funny story to tell. So thank you for giving us a chuckle, and you're welcome for the Zoom Beanie reference.
Yes, you're welcome from me personally, because I'm the only one of us two who have played it.
Yes, I just know the reference because Luke does it all the time. Quotes it all the time.
The fleens part.
Yes.
Whoever you are, make me a pizza.
Yes, that is a golden hit in our household. So
thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren. We also got a message from Mary, who wrote in to talk a little bit about Fitz and Kettricken, first of all.
Yeah, there's a couple things in here. And the first part is the Fitz and Kettricken, specifically end of Trilogy 1.
Yes.
Verity body switching.
Yeah. So in their opinion, the way that they get over the ickiness is to assume that Kettricken knew what was going on.
Which in parentheses in the email, Mary also is like, this also creates its own ickiness, but like it's better than Verity doing it unknowingly for 2 people.
Yeah. And also talking about sort of how there is some comment that Kettricken does make either in this trilogy or the next on how on the timeline of her realizing, I think it's a final trilogy where she talks about how she knew Fitz was Dutiful's dad, or like father Dutiful, and she states something that makes it seem like this is the time frame where she maybe figured it out, or at least that's how what Fitz is under the impression of, that like this trilogy is where Kettricken puts 2 and 2 together.
But Fitz is not aware of anything about that.
Yes, but Fitz is not aware. But in their headcanon, this is sort of a thing that Kettricken knew the whole time, or at least was vaguely aware of.
Yeah,
so.
Just to kind of mentally get over that hurdle.
Yes, yeah.
Which is fair.
Yeah, and then also they wanted to talk about how
parenting a little bit.
Parenting, yeah, and how they love, in the worst way, the way Fitz reverts to being Burek when Dutiful is being so like him. It's so real, and it's so unbelievably accurate with parenting after a difficult upbringing. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing to touch on, and how, like, there is sort of this a theme with Fitz specifically where you keep seeing those habits that he is acting like Burek. He has the same tendency to want to do the things Burek did to him when he sees Dutiful acting in a way that he acted as a child.
Right.
And that is echoed throughout the books. And
Mary speaks about how hard it is to have a difficult upbringing on your own, and then becoming a parent is a whole nother thing on top of that. And without help, it becomes very, very difficult to not just listen to what you were told when you were a kid and then speak that, and do the same kinds of things because that's your experience. That's what you're used to bringing.
And so it's like a whole other can of worms when you have that kid.
So Mary says, there's a lot that I think I can say on Fitz and his parenting skills and how I believe he does what he can with the little he has been given, mostly due to this trauma theme, but I'll maybe save that for another day.
Yeah, so that's good. So it's cool to hear that that part resonating with people and seeing how sort of the whole parenting messaging is interesting, especially when you see Fitz interacting with that child that is similar to him.
Right.
Because I don't think any other of his children are so Fitz-like in the way that we see Dutiful in this first sort of couple chapters.
Right.
I guess Nettle has her moments, and I'm sure B does as well. They're all related, right? Nature versus nurture versus whatever. But I think Dutiful especially is so clearly Fitz-like.
Nature versus nurture versus wolf father skill dreams.
Yes. Versus being a farseer.
Yeah, versus being a farseer. Mary has a final note that kind of ties those two thoughts together, thinking about and kind of framing Dutiful as Fitz's donor child.
Yeah.
So they personally have not gone through that, but know some people who have had donor children, and kind of views Dutiful in that light of Fitz thinks of Dutiful kind of as his kid, but also doesn't have that full attachment because he knew it was just a donor. Again, due to their headcanon that everyone was kind of aware of what was happening.
Yes, yeah. So it is really interesting to put it in that light of maybe the way Fitz feels towards Dutiful is closer to that of a donor.
Yeah.
But also I guess a little bit different because they are still related in either case. I think there is that sort of uncle role. And to me, even reading this, I know sometimes we interchangeably call Dutiful Fitz's son and talk about it that way. And clearly that's not necessarily the case. This is such a weird case. It's hard to talk about the relationship well. But I think it's really interesting to think on too that Fitz in a way, even if we discount the fact that this is technically biologically his son, he is still doing that father figure role in a way that his own uncle was for him.
Right.
And so even in my mind, when I'm picturing Fitz being Dutiful's dad, I'm not picturing him being his real dad, even though he technically is. I'm seeing him as the dad to Dutiful the way Verity was his own dad in some ways. So I don't know.
Thank you very much for the email, Mary.
Yeah.
I want to move on to Spotify real quick. We got a couple comments on there. I'm a couple months behind on Spotify, so I apologize to the listeners. First is PBP, and they were talking about the Lodwine friendship and how Fitz kind of immediately felt like he could be connected to Lodwine, we could be friends in another life.
Yes.
So this commenter says that it's similar to how Fitz describes his relationship with Blade, and especially how Verity is described. Direct, bluff, and charismatic as a soldier. I think it's just another representation of young Fitz idealizing the simple authority figures from his youth. Lodwine is obviously more manipulative and doesn't ever demonstrate that behavior that Fitz puts him on a pedestal for in the first place. But that initial reaction of seeing a soldier and Fitz growing up with soldiers and being surrounded by soldiers might be what contributes to that, I could be a friend with him.
Yeah, which is a really good point. I think we talked a little bit on how it was kind of odd that the relationship that they had and sort of the feeling of he's a soldier sort of guy and how that impacts how he
some
interacts.
People even posited that maybe Lodwine has kind of a wit calming thing to make friends with people.
Yes. Yeah.
But this is a nice little explanation from Fitz's youth.
Yeah,
like, too.
exactly. Sort of that predisposition to see those simple authority figures as friendly, someone to be friends with.
And then we also had another commenter on Spotify, Original Cole, who was checking in on the podcast, chapter 30 of Ship of Destiny, saying, just checked in on Fitz, and nope, Fitz still isn't happy. So
yes,
thanks for checking in. I think that's going to happen a lot if you keep checking in.
Yeah.
So,
good luck.
Good luck.
There are a few happy Fitz chapters.
Yes.
They are few and far between, but they are there.
Thank you, everyone who comments on Spotify as well.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We also have some Facebook comments to go over. First, we'll start with some comments on episode 282, which is the final chapter of the Tawny Man trilogy. And we had Christian write in to talk about how we haven't mentioned the Piebald's connection to the White Woman. In the next book, we see Henja communicating with the Piebalds, and Illustor mentions to Fitz in the last book of this trilogy that she used the Piebalds for her means. I wonder if there are any hints of this connection in this book.
I think I did bring it up briefly at the very beginning of the Piebald plotline introduction, but I personally we didn't dive into it episode to episode. And I didn't see a lot of hints of things, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think this made me think deeper.
I think it's definitely, I think I mentioned it might be directed, like the original Mist Cat plot might be directed or like hinted at that it's possible to the leaders of the Piebalds, Lodwine and Paladine, but I'm not sure.
Right. Well, I think you could potentially look into the fact that Ileana gets to the island or gets to the duchies early.
Right.
And the timing of...
Henja is obviously part of that, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then also the timing of Dutiful disappearing. Like, obviously ships take a while to get there, so there's no like perfect timing that can happen, especially if you're communicating via, I assume, bird. Like, they're probably writing messages in that way. So, like, obviously... that's going to take time as well. But I think clearly there is some connection there.
Yeah.
Like some part of that plot was supposed to be matching up and it didn't because Fitz got involved. And
that's why I said potentially with the Mist Cat thing. Other things, I don't think so. But I think this kind of hint, especially to target Prince Dutiful, is... like, how are they so sure that Prince Dutiful had the wit, right?
Yeah.
You know, like these little hints of like, no, this will work, is somebody pushing along to say like, hey, disrupt the Farseer line.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But it's a good thing to bring up because I hadn't spent much time after the book thinking about that connection retroactively either.
Yes.
I know it comes up a lot more in this book.
Yeah. So that'll be fun to look out for as it comes. But Christian also talked about the whole Nighteyes getting a fishbone stuck in his throat scene and how that might have implications to the finale of this trilogy.
Yeah.
It's important because it's a foreshadowing of Fitz using his skill to bring back the Fool from death in the end of this trilogy. It makes me wonder if the Fool triggered the future path by visiting Fitz. Without the visit from the Fool, would Nighteyes have died there? Or would he have even choked on the fish? Would Fitz have died, lost in Nighteyes when he tries to save him by skilling, if the Fool wouldn't have been there to save Fitz? In a way, the Fool sets up a future where it is a possibility he can be returned from death.
And the Fool doesn't see it.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about how those little things that are happening do have the butterfly effect. And without certain players being there, it changes the trajectory of everything. So
right, yeah.
So yeah.
Every little thing, a little stone nudges the wheel out of out of the rut.
Everyone is important or whatever. We then also have some comments on episode 284, which is the finale of The Piebald Prince and the Willful Princess. First from Ellen saying, happy anniversary to us for the 6-year anniversary, but also regarding the Duke of Buck. My thought reading this for the first time was that it was with Canny that the Duke of Buck and king of 6 duchies converged, and then was just never separated again, because we hear nothing of anyone replacing Canny as heir to the dukedom.
Which makes sense to me, because that's also what you kind of thought too, that maybe Canny just like, we can get rid of this. Like, this doesn't need to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe out of fear, out of backdooring the kingdom, like you said.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's never mentioned again.
Well, also, I mean, realistically, how much power is the Duke of Buck going to have when the kingdom is in Buck? Like,
right, yeah. I think it was a ceremonial position to begin with, but the Duke of Buck had voting power.
Yes. Yeah, but we don't see the Duke of Buck vote with Regal or with Fitz.
It's a reduction of the king's powers in actuality, because the other dukes have more say now, right? There's
no family member to
yeah, there's one less duke that is a close family member to vote with the king.
Crazy. But I think that's true. If anybody else has any evidence that there is a Duke of Buck still, please let us know. And then also, Christian points out there's no mention of Skillmaster or Witmaster, or am I mistaken? I wonder why that is. I have a thought. Do you?
Witmaster is not mentioned. I don't know if there ever was a Witmaster in the history.
Right.
Skillmaster, I'm not sure. I'd love to hear your theory.
First of all, I do think they are mentioned, because who else would have tested the prince and princess for their skill?
That's fair.
Because they are tested to see their skill levels.
Yeah.
Neither of them have much. Also, this is a story told by a servant at the end of the day. She does not have skill magic. She is not a noble person. Why would she know anything about the skill master? Like,
that's true.
I guess like
true. It's the king's magic, right? It wasn't so selective like in King Bounty's day, when he restricted it from being taught except for the royal family. But still, it's going to be fairly secretive, right? I'm sure they don't want people just knowing everything about it, because they're at war with other countries sometimes.
Right. And I feel as though someone like Felicity, who's telling this story, who doesn't have the skill herself, is servant to 2 royals who are not very heavily skilled, has no reason to come in contact with the skill master. I mean, sure, she might have seen them around, but I don't.
So in your mind, if Caution was strongly skilled, we would get at least a paragraph of Felicity being like, and I was alone some of the time because she had lessons to go to that I couldn't attend.
Yeah. I feel like, yes. I feel like there would have been some mention of it. But I do feel like the fact that we know that both Caution and Charger were tested.
Had the skill,
were tested for the skill. Like, who else is doing that? That's not just an apprentice.
Fair. Yeah.
So I would say that they're offhandedly mentioned.
But thank you, Christian. That is an interesting thought as well. We also had some comments on YouTube. We had a few of them, actually. One was from episode 280. This was like the last chapter of Fool's Errand. Second to last. Third to last. I think our last chapter was 282.
Yeah.
For that. So it's near the end. This one's entitled Homecoming. This is from Oz Flipper. In that episode, we mentioned Starling and who she is married to. And I don't remember who, because this is a while ago now, a month. We mentioned that she was married to like a higher noble, like maybe even a duke of some sort. That is incorrect. Oz Flipper, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, corrects us that it's married to Lord Fisher, who is not one of like the high nobles. Is a lord still.
Yeah.
But he's not like...
Probably a lesser lord.
Yeah.
I think it's described in the book. I could be wrong. Again, please feel free to correct me. But I think it's described as he's like an up and coming noble because he has a lot of wealth. But that's like a recent thing. It's not normal. And
he's a young guy too.
He's a young guy. And we have heard...
Which is a plot point, which is funny because Fitz thinks he's an old man.
Right. But we have heard in this book that there is sort of a reimagining of the powers of the dukes in the duchies, right? Because of the wars.
Lord and Lady Grayling, for example, in the Brisinga's household at Gale
Yeah.
Keep. They're kind of very lesser, and we know they're bonded as well through the wit,
Right.
and also the Piebalds are kind of controlling them through that. But before that, we can presume that they were friends and they were up and coming because of those different wealth distributions.
Right. So obviously, like him not being, he's not one of the main dukes originally, but I think he is one of the up and coming important dukes. And I could be wrong on
Not
that
dukes,
detail.
again.
Sorry, not a duke,
Just noble.
just a lord,
Yeah, lord.
a noble. So I think he's one of those up and coming lords.
Yes.
So, but yes, thank you for correcting us on that one.
We also had a comment from Caitlin on episode 282. This is the final of and the epilogue of Fool's Errand. And Caitlin is talking about how it is so wonderful in Fool's Errand, which is also is Caitlin's favorite rote book currently. It's so wonderful to see all the characters reuniting again, and Nighteyes' death is so poignant and the loss is so great. It's so hard to comprehend that Nighteyes is only alive for 3 books when it feels like his impact stretches the whole series, which it does.
Yeah.
Except for the first one, I guess he's not in there at all.
Right.
But also Caitlin says that it feels like Fitz spends more time mourning him than actually being with him, which is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Crazy to think about.
Yeah, I would say probably more time, at the very least, more time grieving to the readers than the readers got to spend with Nighteyes.
Yeah.
At the very least. But I think, it never really goes away, right? Like he always misses his buddy.
And I guess like you could technically count him as a character as Wolffather in the final trilogy.
Yeah.
But then it's like a one mention every 15 chapters or something, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's tough to say.
There are quite a few characters in this series where they have less screen time, so to speak, than I expected from my memory of their impact. And
in Fool's Errand or just in general?
In the series in general, okay. I think there are quite a few different characters where I'm like, we'll come across them and I'll think, oh, I thought they had more. Like, there's more about them, especially Hap in the last book. I thought we got more Hap. And we kind of didn't.
We don't get
He's
anything.
Gone a lot. So, I mean, Fitz thinks about Hap a lot. He's definitely mentioned almost every chapter. But he himself as a character is not in nearly as much as what I thought he would be, considering how important he is to Fitz.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
We also had a comment on our last episode, which is 284, the Part 2 of The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince, from M. Love HB, saying, I'm glad you covered all this. There is so much lore and context added to the realm of the Elderlings, and I think it's also a fun exploration of what is, quote, true against the biases we see in Fitz's time. Watching history be rewritten is already an explored element in the series, so seeing the aftermath of an uncorrected accounting decades later sets more complex stakes for what happens if the Farseer name gets sullied or the ramifications of impulsive choices made by royals and nobles.
Yes. I think that's one of my favorite things Hobb does in general is sort of the ramifications of a flippant move by a royal.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm sort of harsh on Fitz for treating life like it's different because he's a royal sometimes. However, we have seen time and again that it is different, and that like he and Dutiful and the whole Farseer line and anybody in a royal position, they can't just do whatever.
Yeah, they're leaders, right? People look up to them.
And it does drastically affect a lot of things, however they decide to act. So, yeah. Kind of a cool theme.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you very much for that comment. It's like, it was so fun to read that second half of that novella and just like get the true story.
Yeah.
What we've gotten is hints and kind of an amalgamation of the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I really did like the story. I feel like it's going to change how I look at this book, and I almost wish we read it before the start of last book just to see if it would have changed anything. But I think it was a good place.
We didn't. Yeah.
I think that could have potentially changed things too much. But I do feel like I have to read last book again now with the new lens, and we'll see.
And finally, this is from Corn Chowder 2000, saying that they've never really reread books, but came across our podcast on Spotify, commented on YouTube, though, and decided to reread chapter 1 and then listen, and is very excited to catch up in 280, now 4. Their comment was 282 chapters to go. So I just wanted to say welcome when you catch up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, it's so fun. I too was not a rereader. It's just sometimes... I don't know. Sometimes I've changed my ways. I think I am going, maybe, I don't know. I have a lot of books that I like reading. I don't know if I can reread everything, but the good ones I will.
Corn Chowder also mentions that they first read these books in their 30s and can't imagine how it feels to go back after someone reads it in their formative years.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Like, I read these books maybe when I was early 20s, maybe late teens.
Yeah.
Started to read them in late teens, and I don't remember when the last book came out. I know I was waiting for it. I bought it hardcover.
Yeah.
But so rereading them as I'm over 30 now is definitely different, and it'll be way different in another 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more perspective I think I have now. I read everything the first time, I think, when I was 20, maybe 20 to 21.
It took a couple years for you to read the series, I think, because there was a couple month break in between. Like, I don't want to start a new trilogy.
I was also finishing undergrad, so
yeah.
I have a literature degree, so you can imagine I had a lot of books to read my senior year. But no, I think it was like 20 to 21. I finished it in that era, so it's interesting to come back mid 20s to now almost 30, and I definitely have different perspectives. I have different ideas and feelings towards Fitz saying that 35 is old, like now it doesn't feel so old. So what's that about, Fitz?
Just wait till you get tortured and then see. Thank you, everyone who commented on YouTube.
Yes, thank you. Now we'll move over to Instagram, where we had a comment on the most recent episode 284, which is, again, the end of the Willful Princess and Piebald Prince, where we had Disdain comment that at the end of the episode, you mentioned you're not sure where Felicity stored the scroll. If memory serves right, which it might not, she says at the very beginning of the tale she stored the scroll with the other skill scrolls at Buckkeep Castle. This makes me think Chade probably knew, since he raids all the scrolls he can to try to teach Dutiful, or potentially the scroll was sold by Regal to the Whites. And if that's the case, then nobody from Buck likely ever saw the scroll at all. It makes me feel like we get to be the only ones privy to this secret information. Like, we, the readers, are the only people ever who truly know the mystery of the Piebald Prince and his death, or the true details of the true Farseer line, and where Fitz's wit might have hailed from.
The comments about the scroll potentially being sold is really interesting. How it would never have been read before. That is really interesting to me. However, we do know that there are 2 scrolls that were hid, right? Yes. One was in the scrolls in general in Buckkeep, and one was a secret place that Felicity was going to ferret it away, and we don't know.
Yeah. So I would imagine, I don't know if it would be with the skill scrolls, because I don't think Felicity would have been able to
access that library.
So I feel as though it would
was
just
like
be
the old places that are really dusty and no one goes to.
Yeah, like the old parts of the library. Because I assume Buckkeep has a library,
or at least a storeroom.
Yeah. So wherever it is, I feel there is still a real chance that this got sold, right?
And still a chance that nobody read it. However, everything in this series, maybe not the short stories, but this is a novella, so maybe a little bit different, but everything in this series has been experienced or is known by multiple people.
Right.
So I feel like I want to believe that this story and this scroll was found at some point.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it would be good to know. I think even if it wasn't found before Dutiful leaving, I want to believe that it gets found after. Also, I was thinking about it, and I feel like Felicity would have had to have hidden the scroll somewhere in Buckkeep, right? Because that's her home. That's where she's always been.
Yeah, I guess she could have visited home or like her mother's house or something.
But she never talked to her mom after. She like
yeah,
left
that's true. It's true.
her mom. She didn't have a good relationship at the end.
Could have returned back to home.
That's true.
I don't know.
I don't know either. It's kind of interesting to think about, though. So I feel like in my mind, she put it in a crack in the wall in her room, and that's the room that is Fitz's room, and that's and it gets found. I don't know. Maybe not. I also have this. I don't know. Okay, this is a segue for me because also I had this theory, and I don't know if I said it on the pod or if I just said it to Luke in a conversation before we started recording. We try not to talk about stuff before recording so this doesn't happen. But I made the comment that Felicity states that when Caution is like moping about because she thinks that her man also got another woman pregnant, she looks out the window every day and can see the stables.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think, on the podcast.
Okay,
because that means that potentially Verity or Chivalry were staying there.
Yes,
in those
because
rooms, if the rooms didn't change.
Yeah, this is the Queen in Waiting's room.
So Verity could potentially have looked down on Fitz pretty much every day, and we talked about how Chivalry could have been riding with him and looking at Fitz as well.
I thought that was sweet. I just want to make sure that that theory got out there. So, so sorry if I said it again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, but thank you, Disdain, for the ideas.
We also had some messages on Instagram, starting with Iggy. And Iggy was wondering if we had any specific, or you guys,
the listeners,
listeners as well, had any specific music that you relate to or goes with this series in particular. Iggy says, like every time I hear the album Terraformer by Thank You Scientist, I get dropped into the Tawny Man trilogy, or listening to A Black Mile to the Surface by Manchester Orchestra brings up memories of the final trilogy. I was listening to these albums on a nonstop while reading the books. Just curious if anyone else has some similar music to book memories. For these books specifically, I don't think I do. I usually don't. I'm kind of weird this way. I really like having multiple sources of noise on if I'm just on my computer or playing video games or something. Sometimes I'll have a stream and music and be playing a video game all at the same time, 3 different sources of stuff. But if I'm reading, I don't usually like music.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like listening to music when I read, but I can't listen to lyric music because I like singing a lot. I think it's a theater kid in me.
You're a lyric person.
I'm a lyric person. So when I'm reading, I'm specifically listening to like Studio Ghibli, I don't know, sorry, mixes. Classical music, specifically classic bangers with a picture of Mozart with the funny meme glasses on him on Spotify. That is the name. Check it out. It's great. I'm also a band nerd as well as a theater nerd. So I do love a good classical banger.
I mean, true.
And I think it really adds the ambiance of reading. It is my study music as well, but I think it helps me focus on the words. Mm-hmm. Video game background music is really good to read to as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't tell you specifically I don't think anything comes to mind. However, I did want to say that our friends at Buckkeep Radio, I believe when they were doing this series, they made Spotify lists that playlists for each book. I think, I don't know if it was the trilogies or the books that got their own playlist, but yeah, so you could check those out. That's pretty cool. I haven't because I don't want it to influence anything. But I know that they did that, and so that's pretty cool. So that could be an answer as well.
Yeah.
So you're not the only one who puts music to the books.
Yeah, so let us know if you guys have kind of associations with books and music, or if you guys read when you read, listen to music when you read.
Read when you read.
Read when you read. If you read a different book when you're listening to the audiobook of this, I don't know.
I mean, hey, if you could do that, please write in and let me know your IQ because.
Right. Thank you, Iggy.
Thanks, Iggy. We also got a message from Peculiar Ponies, who let us know that horses do fight to defend, but prefer to fight if there's no other option.
Yeah, we were talking about this in the novella, right?
Yes.
And man, it's been so long. It's either the novella or it might have been the end of.
This could be in context of what's his name?
Lodwine.
Yeah.
And I think it was near the end of that.
Yeah. How he like is a warrior, but like are horses warriors?
Yeah.
That's sort of the question I think we posed. But horses do fight and defend to defend, but prefer to fight a flight if there's an option.
Yeah, basically giving an example, if there's a herd of horses and a grizzly comes, they'll probably just leave that horse to fend for itself. But if it's like a lone wolf or something like that, they will probably just gang up on the wolf.
Yeah. Horses also defend their people sometimes. However, having both dogs and horses, I'd say my dogs react more strongly when they feel like they have to defend me, actively going after the threat, while my horses are more likely to guard my body, blocking or pushing others away.
Yeah. Sorry that we don't remember the context that really like triggered this response. So
I do think it was the conversation, especially with the addendum of the dog situation. I think it was sort of that conversation of like Fitz having bonded to a dog versus or a wolf versus Lodwine with the horse, and sort of how that personality plays off each other.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Peculiar Ponies. I always love the kind of horse lore that we
yes,
learn.
honestly, I feel like
information.
Yeah, I'm learning so much.
We also had a message from Eli.
Yeah.
Who sent in a picture of a shirt and some bookmarks that their mom got them, which is awesome because they're themed based around the books, and they got their mom to read the books. And Eli says she was only slightly mad at me for suggesting a book where the dogs keep dying, but otherwise loved it.
Fair. That's a valid criticism.
Also, they're only 2 years behind on the podcast now. The earthquake just is shaking Malta in the Elderling city. So a little bit behind, but also has a little aside for you, Emma, here.
Yes.
Saying, and while I am the first person to hop on the Malta hate bandwagon, I must say that occasionally I do feel like you, Emma in this case, can be a tad bit hard on her. But nothing did make me more joyous than hearing how my hatred of her wasn't solely mine.
Yeah.
So is with you, but maybe you went a little overboard.
Yeah,
feels like. I don't think so.
No, I really don't like Malta. I think my problem is that I personally have a very strong sense of justice, and I don't like that Malta never really like gets I don't feel like she like doesn't follow the rules. She lies a lot, and ultimately like it doesn't feel like the end justifies the means. She's not punished. She's not, and I don't mean that to say like she deserves what happened to her. I wish ill on her, but like I think I would have less of a problem if there was any real negative consequences to her actions, right? Like
it's the same reason that you get so uppity about, and especially about kind of in the last few chapters and his end.
Yeah.
And like nobody is saying that, you know, maybe you're too harsh on Kenneth.
Right.
Because like, can you be too harsh on Kenneth?
Right. And like obviously.
But it's the same kind of justice that you feel towards him is the same kind of thing that you feel towards Malta.
Yeah, my brain doesn't separate the two as being like, well, let's put it in context of like, no, my brain
Which
doesn't
trauma is worse.
Yeah, my brain just says, hey, injustice, bad, why no punishment?
But also you mentioned before too that knowing someone with similar characteristics to Malta early on in your life is like also triggering.
Yes. Not to use the word lightly, but yes. Yeah, no, I definitely have had a Malta in my life. So that probably also makes me a little bit harsher.
But it is funny to have people chime in, especially Eli. I don't know how much Eli has interacted with the online fandom, but Malta hate isn't. You're not alone in that, at least for the first book.
And I don't think very many people like Malta. I did.
Although I will say, like, everyone says, oh yeah, Malta is the best character arc of all time, that sort of thing. So I guess if you're not reading into it a lot, you're not seeing a lot of people being like, no, I hated her so much.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I do come around to Malta. You all know, you've been here. I do like Malta in some way. I just wish that there was more consequences to her actions in a fitting way. I don't want.
Right.
I don't feel like the like trauma she went through was worth it. They're not equal in my eyes, but I would like her to have punishment for like lying. I don't know.
And finally, our last message on Instagram was Gil. Oh, thank you, Eli, by the way. Did not.
Yeah.
Thank you. Our last message on Instagram was Gil talking about 283, listening to 283 at least. And I believe Emma brought up the fact that Felicity and Caution were lovers. And Gil thinks that Felicity is the only lesbian/bi female character in Rote. I remember there are quite a few gay/bi male characters like Kenneth, Ygritte and Hest, and I forget his name from the Rainwild Chronicles. I think it's Cedric and Carson.
Yes.
But maybe there is another one? Gil can't think of any other women.
Yeah. Well, technically Caution would fall under bi because Caution does like Felicity back in some capacity and is, they're equal partners in that relationship, I guess. But yeah, I feel like Felicity
outside of that relationship.
Like
there isn't any other mention that we can think of either.
Yeah, which I think is also partially why I was like, hey, lesbian, like representation, because we don't get a ton of it. But yeah, no, I think it's really fun to see. I guess it's hard because we don't get a ton of insight onto very many people in this world's sort of like sexual identification.
And specifically for the Rainwild Chronicles, speaking of like Hest, Cedric, Carson, and anybody else who is hinted at there, that was a focus on the plot of male characters. And like the gay scene underground in the noble societies, like the trader societies.
Yes.
That wasn't an exploration of everything LGBTQ.
Yes.
That was just specifically that one little nuance and facet of that world.
Yeah. I would argue, I mean, I guess it doesn't feel like as big of a deal in the minds, or not.
I mean, there was a reason it was a secret, you know?
Yeah. Like, I don't feel I want to say I don't think it was as big of a deal for the women characters, but relationship are important in their stories as well. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as like forefront to their stories, which is really interesting to think on.
But we do get a mention of it in Willful Princess and Piebald Prince.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Although, I don't know, in my headcanon, Dello, Malta's friend, is a lesbian or bi. So I don't know why. Don't ask me. That's just a personal thing. That's wanting representation in media, baby. That's.
Thank you, Gil.
And thank you to everyone.
We actually had one more thing on Blue Sky.
Yes.
Degenhart had a couple comments. One, most recently, we'll talk about first, was the flowers that Felicity brings into Caution's room when she's
giving birth
and needs access, and says these are, a family recipe to ease pain or whatever. She was carrying nosegays, and Degenhart's like, I don't know if there's a connection, but there has to be because Molly is Molly Nosegay.
Yes.
I mean, technically it's it's Molly
Chandler.
Chandler. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really going blank there.
Yeah. For some reason, right in my mind. I'm never the one who remembers names either, so.
I went through the whole list. Tinker, Tailor, Solar.
Yes,
Soldier, but
Chandler. Because I'd always sticks with me because I want to say Candler, and it's definitely Chandler.
Yes. Yeah, so that's her like real last name, but yeah, Molly Nosegay is like a very typical thing that she's brought up and associated with.
Yeah. So perhaps she is somewhat related. It would not be a direct relation to Felicity because Felicity only has the one child who dies.
And also, I don't think that's Felicity's last name either, but it's a nod.
It is a nod, and I like it. I didn't even catch it, so I'm really glad someone did. Thank you, Degenhart. Degenhart also wrote in about the end of the last book.
Fool's Errand.
Fool's Errand, thank you. Again, we take turns. Talking about how they love Jenna because she feels like she's the only normal person in the whole series, which is fair assessment.
Yeah, that I mean, despite being named a hedge witch,
Yeah.
and like
She has very like some semi-normal opinions and like
yeah.
I mean, it just feels very
Mm-hmm.
middleman to give us a
I think
context.
it's Jinna and the blind minstrel are like the two most normal
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. But also concerning Laurel, Degenhart says, I don't think she is per se a bad person / character. She does the best she can based on what she thinks is right. But she does have a eugenicist point of view concerning old blood folks, basically not wanting them to reproduce. Let me redact my first comment here. She is a bad person if she really thinks that.
Emma related to that too.
Yeah. There is that like nuance of like sometimes you see a character and like outside of their one bad thing,
they're good.
they're like not that bad really. And then you think hard on like the one bad thing actually being kind of really bad. And like, okay, yeah, they aren't a good person, but like they could be. I think with Laurel,
I don't think she's eugenicist view. We were talking about this right before we hit record on this as well. I said that I think she's more of a you can't double dip. You have to choose one or the other. Don't care if you have the wit. Just don't have a bonded partner and have a spouse.
it
with
feels
kids.
very much like I don't care if you're gay, just don't do it in front of me.
Yeah.
Which is like
which isn't the worst homophobe to have, but it's not great.
I mean, zero homophobes is preferable.
Yes,
However, if you
exactly.
had to choose between homophobes, the one that's like, just don't do it in front of me, maybe the better one to be around. Like, if you have to be around one.
Exactly. You know?
But also, I kind of see this as Laurel's pretty young here. And so I a little bit see this as
Taking a hardline stance based on her childhood troubles.
Yeah. And I think too, this is something that like she could grow in and understand later. I think especially after that, like she's speaking from what she has thought for a really long time. But
her kid could have the wit.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that they don't. Like her and
Yes.
Shade's child does not have the wit. However, could have.
Yes. And so I think it's really interesting to think on like potentially this is more coming out of a like habit of saying these sort of views than it is
Yeah.
from a real hardline stance, never going to change sort of place. And like, especially with everything that's just happened, I think there is that we have been shown that she can grow towards more acceptance of witted folk.
Yeah.
And so I'm more likely to give her more leniency because I think she's young and can change her mind. I think, but again, like it's still bad is bad, right? So
Bad is bad,
like it's not
for
a good
sure.
viewpoint. I'm not excusing the viewpoint, but I do think that I see room for growth, and I think that's really important in people because
she's not married and she's not 30 yet, so she's not set in her ways.
she isn't set in her ways yet. Not till you're 30. So
So spring is going to turn her head, and that spring is Chade, the 80-year-old man.
ugh, gross.
Thank
Oh.
you. Thank you, Degenhart.
Thank you, Degenhart. And thank you to everybody who writes in and gives us little funny things to talk about. We appreciate you guys so much, and we can't wait to hear from you next week.